This is Arab Talk on KPOO 89.5 FM in San Francisco. This is Arab Talk with Jess and Jamal. I'm Jess Jamal.
And I'm Jamal Dejani.
Jamal, there is so much to talk about, and we just don't have enough time today. A lot of really great stories. Today, we're going to talk a little bit about how Qatar is doing in the face of international, I wouldn't say criticism, but international comments about how this first Arab country to host the World Cup is doing. And we're going to kind of review all of that and kind of get a pulse on how Qatar is doing under these circumstances. And frankly, a very sad story that we're going to cover next. And this is the sad story about how Israeli journalists are not being welcomed with love and affection by people in Qatar and Doha right now. I mean, it seems like the Israeli journalists and Israeli tourists who are visiting Doha right now for the World Cup are kind of perplexed and surprised as to why they're not being loved and embraced with open arms. We'll talk a little bit about that because there have been a lot of Palestinian flags that have been popping up all over Doha at the World Cup. And we'll talk a little bit about why Israeli journalists should not be surprised. But before we get to that, Jamal, we're going to watch a really great interview you did with Israeli investigative journalist David Sheen, who's going to talk about the rise and the return, basically, of the Kahanist movement, this extremist right-wing terrorist movement that is back. I'm not sure it ever went away, but it's re-energizing itself in Israeli politics and society. So really great interview.
That's right, Jess. Not only they are back, but they are going to be back in the government. So it's not just they're being embraced basically and normalized. Yep. And then we'll talk about also the reaction from afterwards from the United States. But first, let's watch David Sheen. On November 1st, Israel held its fifth round of elections in 5 years. Although Benjamin Netanyahu remains awash in corruption charges that have made him a pariah to many within his usual nationalist Likud base, he has managed to prevail by forming a coalition with ultra-extreme right political factions. The most conspicuous of these is Itamar Ben-Gvir, slated to be Israel's next Minister of National Security. A follower of the late extremist Meir Kahane, Ben-Gvir's party Jewish Power plans to ensure a Jewish majority with, and I'm quoting here, emigration, transfer of the enemy, and exchange of populations, and any other way that will help the enemy leave our country. The enemy referred to are the indigenous Palestinians. Joining us on Arab Talk this week is David Sheen to discuss the increasing political legitimacy of Israel's extreme right and what it signifies for the future. David is an investigative journalist based in Haifa who has covered issues on Palestine and Israel since 2010. His focus is largely on racial tensions and religious extremism within Israeli society, but also includes women's and LGBTQ issues, among others. His reporting has been featured in regional and international outlets, including the European parliaments, as well as colleges across the United States. Welcome to Arab Talk, David.
Thank you for having me.
First, let me thank you for your excellent reporting and simplifying Israel's political tangles into clear, identifiable trends. Really appreciate that. Let's begin with the basics, just to give our listeners, maybe you should give them a breakdown on Israeli parliament and who is required to become Israel's prime minister, and how is it possible that Israel is holding its fifth election in 5 years?
Good questions, all of them. Okay, well, let's start off with just a basic understanding. As you pointed out, to become prime minister of Israel, it's not enough to be the leader of the largest party, because no party has had a majority ever in Israel's history, never had 51% of the seats in parliament. So it's always been a coalition. And throughout Israel's history, those coalitions have always looked like this. The largest segment of Israeli society, 60% approximately, what we call secular nationalists, those who would support a one-state solution of apartheid solution, where one state ethnocracy, where Jews have more rights than non-Jews. Then there's also the second largest camp with about 20% of the votes of the electorate, and that's what we'd call the theocratic camp, the religious parties who traditionally have not only would they like to see there to be a one state from the river to the sea, but of apartheid, they would also like that river to the sea state to be actually ethnically cleansed of non-Jews, but being as traditionally Jews have lived in it as a minority, so they said, that is for the Messianic era. We just follow our rules and regulations, whatever it says in the Torah and the Talmud, but yes, our vision ultimately is for an ethnically cleansed state, but that's not for us to bring into being, that's for Yahweh. But now we see kind of a bastard child of these two camps, the largest camp in Israel, the secular nationalists, and the second largest camp that has always been a partnership between the two running the country. But now we have almost the bastard child of these. We can call it the monarchist camp. So not the religious, they also want the country to be ethnically cleansed. But unlike the religious, they're not waiting for some messianic era. Like the nationalists, they believe that it's for them to create the facts on the ground and bring the world they want to see into being. So these people, as you've said, the Kahane party, the followers of Meir Kahane, are at the vanguard of this monarchist or messianist movement. And just to understand how they are differentiated from these other camps, this new camp that has surged and all of a sudden become the kingmakers of Israeli politics, being the second largest party in Benjamin Netanyahu's new government. So this Kahanist camp, the way that they're different is they don't just say, oh, well, we need to kill Arabs and Palestinians because what to do is just part of being the lords of the land, and occasionally we will have to put down seditions. No, what makes the Kahanists separate is they actually believe it's a mitzvah. They believe it's like a way of consecrating God to kill Palestinians. And other than that, they also, they want to establish a theocracy, very strict rules of religious Orthodox Judaism. They also want to establish a monarchy. They want to demolish the Al-Aqsa Mosque and the whole Al-Aqsa compound, the Dome of the Rock, all the beautiful buildings on the Holy Esplanade in the center of the old city of Jerusalem, and demolish it and build a temple/abattoir on top of it, a Jewish temple where they will slaughter on Jewish holidays more than 10,000 animals a day. And for that to be the focus of this new monarchy theocracy. And they want that monarchy theocracy not only to exist within the territories that Israel now controls, all of mandatory Palestine, all of historic Palestine, but they also want it to expand, for Jewish armies to go forth and expand the empire and to conquer the nations around it, Egypt, Jordan, Syria, Lebanon, Iran, Iraq, Turkey. I've heard some people speak even as far as South America. It's not a joke. They really believe in this, in bringing about a Jewish empire, because that's their belief. They're Jewish monarchists. They believe that they themselves are, a high race, special people.
I mean, somebody like here, when you mentioned Jewish monarchists, it's kind of like brings us like, I don't know to what age, but I heard you actually speaking about this, and you mentioned to understand political ideology in Israel, one had to start with how each party views the Torah. Can you elaborate on this?
Sure. It's one of the ways that I've suggested that it helps us to understand not just the Israeli political map, but also we could speak of Jewish politics. First of all, let's just say this only really can begin from the French Revolution, because before that, if Jews don't have citizenship in the countries that they live and they don't have rights, then their only safety comes from their leadership, whether it's in this case, rabbinic leadership. So, but as soon as you have Jewish people becoming citizens of the states in which they live, that process leads to an explosion of Jewish political thought in every direction. So Jewish capitalists, Jewish socialists. So how do we understand? One of the ways that we can understand these is we can ask the question, how do these different groups of Jews relate to Israel's or the Jewish people's sacred texts, the Torah, right, and the Talmud? So we would ask the question, is the Torah holy, and is the Torah just? So let's say when we ask that of the theocratic camp, what they would say, the traditionally what we would see as Orthodox Jews, they would say, yes, the Torah is holy, it was written by God, and yes, it's just when it says that we are God's chosen people and this land is especially for us. Okay, that's easy to understand. Then there's, from that point, we have a new camp, a liberal camp, a reformist camp, and they would say yes and no. They say, yes, the Torah is holy. These are sacred texts, the tradition is holy to us, but no, it's not just, it's not right the way it is. We need to correct it and amend it and bring it in line with our with our modern morals. And so that would be the liberal camp in Jewish society. And then we have the nationalist camp of and they're, traditionally what we would call Zionists. And they would say the opposite. They wouldn't say yes, no, they would say no, yes. So they would say of the Torah, no, it's not holy. Of course not. It's written by people, not by God. And it was edited by other people in different periods of time. And those people, wrote this book, and this is it. It's our literature, just as Shakespeare is the literature of the British people. So this is our, cultural literature, but it's not holy. But is it just when it says that this land, that we are special, this land belongs to us? Yes, that it's fair. This is our contract of ownership. So, of course, summarizing that hypocritical position of the nationalists, no, there is no God, but yes, God gave us this land. So in any case, and of course, then there's also the Jewish socialist camp, which 100 years ago was the largest of those camps, at least in the United States where you're living, and that their answers were no and no. No, these are not holy texts. They're just written by our ancestors, by humans. They have failings like every one of us. And no, it's not just when it says the land does not belong to anyone more than belong to one people more than anyone else, and if anything, we belong to it, not it to us. And in any case, so that's the Jewish socialist camp. So as I said, we just like every society, we've got a spectrum of political opinions in the Jewish
I want to go back to what you designate as the ultra-right, or you designate the ultra-right as monarchists, or a fifth camp. And note that they combine the worst characteristics of the supremacists and apportionists camps. Can you explain how much worse things can get?
Right. Well, I mean, I kind of unloaded all the barrels, but it can get very, very sickening. These people have, in recent decades, made every effort to get their hands on the wheels of power. And I'll explain how they did this. And because don't forget, the first time that this monarchist camp really made it onto the scene in Israeli politics, sure, it was, it burst into the consciousness of Jewish Israelis after the 6-Day War, because then Israel was so successful militarily that all of a sudden people, Jewish nationalists and Jewish religious people start thinking, oh my God, maybe this is the messianic times. Maybe we really can do everything we want and not have to, think about what anyone else will say. So that's when it kind of, explodes in people's minds, but it only becomes a political force in the mid-1980s. At that point, the founding father of Kahanism, Rabbi Meir Kahane, American-born rabbi who moved to Israel, he enters the Knesset after many years, and at that point he gets enough support from the populace. At that point, you only needed 1% of the population, of the popular vote, to get in, and he gets it, and he gets into Knesset just with the one seat. But immediately, the way he changed Israeli society, the taboo that he broke was by openly inciting ethnic cleansing. He openly said, this is my platform to ethnically cleanse. Of course, there were Zionist leaders who not only thought it, spoke about it, wrote about it, but practiced it, in the Nakba and at other points in Israeli history. But here was the first politician who was running a campaign on the basis of it, of like actually trying to elicit votes on the basis for, if you vote for me, I will commit ethnic cleansing, So that's what the change, that out and out racism, the unabashed racism, that was the change that he brought to the Israeli scene. And because it was so, outspokenly racist, it even triggered the nationalist camp at that time. And at that point, remember, this isn't the labor nationalists, this is the Likud nationalists, so the right-wing nationalists. Even for them at that time, in the mid-1980s, even for them, it was a step too far, just too racist for their palate. And so they actually worked together to, the nationalists and, worked together to make it illegal for Kahane to run again, to make it a requirement that you not espouse outright racism if you want to be a candidate for Knesset. So Kahane was not in the Knesset after one round, and he was assassinated in a couple of years after he left the Knesset. And for many years, his supporters never managed to make it back into the Knesset. But that changed in recent years. And the main reasons that it changed, I can list several, but one of the main reasons is Israeli society has shifted massively more and more to the right. I mean, it was always nationalist, as I explained. All Israeli governments have been nationalist, but since the Second Intifada, certainly Israeli society has been moving further and further and further to the right. At that same time, when the Kahanists were booted out of the Knesset, when Kahane himself was restricted from re-entering, it put them on the Kahane movement on a process of, okay, well, how do we get back into the Knesset? If we were prevented from reaching power by the largest nationalist party, by the Likud party, if they prevent, so the only way that we're going to be able to get back in is with the help of we need to change the Likud from the inside. And so they that was their target, and they set out to do that, and they did that. They did that starting in at the beginning of the Second Intifada, what's called the Jewish Leadership Movement, which was a group of Kahanists who basically started a faction within Israel's ruling Likud party. And at the beginning, first they were just a small faction, but they grew and grew in power and influence. And eventually, even people who weren't part of their faction started, trying to be in their favor. So now to the point where you actually have several Kahanists serving in the ruling Likud party, and no one even thinks twice about it. It's now, there's a lot of fusion. I mean, first of all, their funders are the same. The person who funds the biggest funder of Benjamin Netanyahu is also the biggest funder of the Kahanist movement, including its terrorist wings. So we now really have a fusion between.
Who's that funder? Are you talking about the Adelson family?
No, I'm talking about the Phallic family. They are the owners of Duty Free America, and for quite a few years now, they have been the biggest funders of both Benjamin Netanyahu and the Lehava movement and the wider Kahane movement here in Palestine. So, of course, but that's actually not a new thing. For some decades now, there have been several American Zionists who have been funding simultaneously both Benjamin Netanyahu's political rise to power and Kahane movement projects like Ateret Kohanim and other projects to dispossess Palestinian people in Jerusalem and Hebron and such. So that's basically what we have now. We have a situation where Israeli society has shifted to the right. Meanwhile, the Kahanists have cannibalized the Likud from within. Now, Kahanism is acceptable when, as you pointed out, Netanyahu was on the ropes, starting to lose his grip on power. He realized that to get over the top, the only way he could do that is with a group of society, let's say, that hasn't up until now been represented in the polls, because the Kahanists, as I pointed out, started out with only 1%. That was all Meir Kahane was able to get back when he ran in the 1980s. And over the years, to keep Palestinian parties out of the Knesset, nationalist legislatures actually, legislators increased the limit or the prerequisite required to get into the Knesset. If in Kahane's day it was only 1%, it was later doubled to 2%, and now it's almost 4% of the popular vote that you need to get. Okay. Yeah, so they did that, of course, in order to try to prevent the Palestinian parties who waver at about that level of performance that they were hoping that they would not be able to reach that goal and then not be in the next Knesset. And in fact, that did happen in the case of Tajamua, Balad party just now. But to the point, the Kahanists were never able to, from the 90s, 2000s, 2010s, they were never able to get past that almost 4% in order to get into the Knesset on their own. And so what Netanyahu did was he brought them in alliance, into coalition with other far-right forces and legitimized them, said, it's okay, even though these are terrorists. This is a group that, 25 years ago, we declared this group to be terrorists after they committed the worst, most heinous mass murder in Israeli history, in 29 Palestinians murdered at the Ibrahimi Mosque in Hebron in 1994. So we're going to rehabilitate these terrorists and now make a political alliance so that their votes will help me retake the prime minister's office or stay in the prime minister's office. So that was Netanyahu's game. But by legitimizing the Kahanists, now what has happened is that as a legitimate political force, once racist Israelis realize that they're a legitimate political force, okay, so now we can vote for them. So now he's sucking up votes from the other political parties who in recent years, Likud lawmakers have almost sounded indistinguishable from Kahanists. But, the same thing that the Likud did all these years to Labor and the other so-called centrist lawmakers who weren't racist enough. If they wanted their racism or their nationalism, they would just go further to the right and further to the right. And so now that's what's happened again, that there's now a further right alternative. And frankly, there's another further right alternative that's about to split up from the Kahanist party. If you can imagine that, the Kahanists aren't even radical enough. But in the meantime, they've now managed to get from Prime Minister Netanyahu promises of, as he said, the police ministry.
How will he be able to address or satisfy their promises? You started talking about their long-term vision and the designs for expanding far beyond what are currently considered to be Israel's borders. And how is he going to satisfy them and at the same time satisfy his supporters in the West, for example, in the United States, who are now, frankly, I noticed that they are embarrassed by their inclusion?
Mm-hmm. Well, it's an interesting question. I don't think, from here in Haifa, I don't see that any American government or any European government or any government for that matter has ever stepped in really and said, okay, now we're going to withhold our support because of this or that. I mean, it's been this past year this is the so-called change government, the so-called alternative to Netanyahu. And it was the worst year in over a decade in terms of the amount of Palestinians killed. And so I don't see any savior coming in from outside and somehow putting their foot down and saying enough is enough. That's our red line, and we'll take it from here. No. I don't see any stumbling block. I don't see any force that can possibly countermand what we're looking at now. I don't know enough about the geopolitics outside the country to say if we're going to see excursions past the borders, but certainly within mandatory, historic Palestine, I think that we're going to see it's going to be much, much, much worse, because now the police forces are going to be explicitly controlled by the Kahanists. Don't forget, 1 year ago, just after the previous round of elections for the 24th Knesset, so at that point, just afterwards, basically, Itamar Ben-Gvir, the head of the Kahanist party, he essentially incited what Israel's police chief called a Jewish intifada, or more people call race riots or anti-Palestinian pogroms across the country, organizing groups of people to enter, towns where historically Palestinian, now have Jewish majorities, but still have significant Palestinian minorities, mixed communities. Some of the rare ones where Jews and Arabs live side by side, and sending far-right monarchists like himself to go to those areas and, to increase and attack, frankly. But without going into detail about that, the point is Israel's police chief called that a Jewish intifada and blamed Ben-Gvir for inciting it. Mm. Now Ben-Gvir is his boss. And if there was any question of what we've already seen them embracing and hugging in public, and so there's no suspicion that he's going to now quit in, protest or something like that. He's perfectly accepted this new situation, which is that, these arch racists now run the roost. They run Israel's police forces. So that can only mean things are going to get worse for Palestinians, and also for, of course, for Jews who support or are in solidarity with Palestinians. So I can't even begin to imagine. But I imagine that as soon as the government steps in and actually signs into power in a couple days or weeks, whenever it is, we're going to get a whiplash. How far to the far right we're going to go? How quickly?
People like to think that these extremist racist factions are an anomaly, but they actually have increasing support throughout Israel, as you've mentioned. Talk about this notion of a good Israel and a bad Israel that keeps people in denial.
Well, I mean, in denial, are we talking about Americans? Are we talking about Israelis in denial? Who's denied? Would you like me to opine on?
I think both. I think Israelis and their supporters, you know.
Well, it's difficult for me to speak too much to that since I'm not there. I'm not part of the discourse. You know, I'm just here on the ground, you know, looking at what happens. And frankly, when I come to other places like the United States and speak about my reporting, it's incredibly depressing because it's obvious to the people I'm speaking to that they're all hearing this stuff for the first time, most of them. Like, even though I'm speaking to often seasoned veterans or seasoned activists or whatnot, they're often just like flabbergasted at the things that I'm, because, okay, admittedly, not everyone can read or speak Hebrew, but, you know, even today in the modern age, we're only like a tweet away from getting to, and still, obviously, people are still shocked because there's gatekeeping. And so it's incredibly frustrating. I often, you know, I have thought in the past that perhaps if people were, you know, knew more about the facts, that would change people. But sometimes it's not facts that changes people's minds. I can, you know, obviously I didn't start out to, you know, I didn't start where I am today. I myself moved politically from my childhood growing up as a Zionist Jew. So my point is that I don't know what's going to shift people, but to me it's frightening that as bad as things are getting, and then all along people have said to me, David, you know, you're specializing in the Kahanists. Right now, that's a really niche, you know, you're an expert on the Israeli far right. But who is that of interest to? These people will never come to power, you know. And then once these people started to come to power, people said, oh, no, definitely CNN is going to be at your door, you know, tomorrow. But of course, none of those things have happened. These, you know, the Kahanists have now become with their hands on the steering wheel. They are the second largest faction in the government. So for all intents and purposes, they are the kingmakers of Israeli politics. And still, no one's beating down my path to my door or anything like that. There's an incredible, and that's just about the Kahanists, but just in Israel, about Israel in general, there's a paucity of experience. There's a paucity of knowledge about this, of what actually is going on in the ground. It's frightening.
Well, that's why I'm talking about the denial. I've had a conversation a few months ago with Miko Peled, and this is the time when those Kahanists were marching at Damascus Gate in Jerusalem, chanting "Death to Arabs" and so forth. Everybody saw that on TV, I assumed, but apparently not. And then I was talking to him about, you know, we were mentioning the word extremist, and he got upset and he said, "No, these are not just the extremists. Don't call them extremists. I mean, this is, to him, Israeli society. I mean, this is where we arrived at this point. There is no distinction between the Kahanists and maybe the average Israeli." I mean, do you share the same point?
Well, I've been to Jerusalem many times when these are ongoing. I've filmed them multiple times, these Death to the Arabs rallies, or what they call Flag Day, which we see as like, you know, people chanting genocide. I don't think of the flag, I think of the genocide chants. That's the first thing that comes to mind. But in terms of, is this like are these people extremists, or are they a reflection of Israeli society? The people that I saw there are just they're no different than the people that you meet in Israeli cities and towns across the country.
Wow.
They are pulled out from the regular, society. And more to the point, we can just look at a Pew poll from a couple of years ago that Pew Research did a study, and they inquired amongst Jewish Israelis, and they asked them, how, do you support ethnically cleansing the country? They didn't use that word, but they said, would you like to remove the Arabs from the country? And 49%
Wow.
of Israeli Jews said yes. So it's true that up until these last couple of years, we haven't seen a mass people giving their votes to the party that says, I'm going to carry that out. But even obviously that sentiment is not just on the hearts, but on the lips of many Jewish Israelis, up to half. These are people who are willing to tell. I'm assuming that there were some people who felt that way, but weren't willing to openly admit it. In any case, we now have a situation where there's a party that has, 14 seats in the 120-seat Knesset, so over a tenth of the seats in the Knesset. It's and like I said, the second largest party in the government. It's absolutely incredible, but I don't think it's going to make a single difference, not to the administration officials in the United States, and not even to the leaders of the Jewish community, who are going to continue to support all, the settlement, the colonial project here.
So within the past, I would say less than 2 years now, several human rights organizations, Amnesty International, Human Rights Watch, Israel's own human rights organization, B'Tselem, and so on, they have labeled Israel as an apartheid state. I mean, what's the reaction within the country when you get to this level that now not only international human rights organizations and the United Nations rapporteur, but also Israeli human rights organizations are saying that we are an apartheid state, including, by the way, which I'm sure you know that, the former Attorney General wrote an op-ed saying, and now I realize that my country is an apartheid. Is this making any difference? Or it's just like, again, I go back to the denial or a knee-jerk reaction that you hear it sometimes, oh, everybody hates us, that's nonsense.
It's exactly as you say. There is an incredibly well-oiled machine, and it's already been drummed into people from day one. So I'll just give you a couple quick examples to understand. We have just now, because of the World Cup, so an Israeli team of journalists went to film there, and they was so shocked that people didn't want to speak to them. And of course, as soon as he experienced this, he interpreted this as anti-Semitism. And this is allegedly an intelligent person who comes to this conclusion. And to me, it's really symptomatic of the fact that how Israelis have become, and I hate to use this word because it's often used as kind of like as a smear against the left, but they've become such snowflakes. Like here we have the same week an Israeli soldier decked out in the most modern gear in Halil, in Hebron, and he's dancing with a group of American tourists, and then just upon seeing a group of Israelis who are critical of the situation or the apartheid reality of Hebron, he freaked out and then started beating up these, by all counts, religious Israeli Jews who have also come to the conclusion, like the Attorney General you mentioned, that this is an apartheid state and it's a vile situation that they can't countenance. And so here they just upon hearing a civilian person cracking through this facade of that, I'm dancing, I'm here wearing a soldier's uniform, and I'm policing Hebron, but there's these Jews who are visiting me from some other country, and they support the regime. So I'm now not going to be a soldier. I'm going to be dancing. And then as soon as someone ruins my high by remembering, like, this is disgusting, that's what incited, oh, I'm going to beat you leftists, I'm going to kick the hell out of you. And this was all filmed by Issa Amro, in Khalil. But what I found was so interesting was that he felt so triggered by people not sharing his view that, Jewish supremacy must rule the country. Like that he was so triggered by that he wasn't secure enough in his own supremacist regime, that even just like a pinprick of it, shattered his reality and got him so enraged. So it's really emblematic of what Israelis are, what their media situation is. Don't forget, it's the only country where Hebrew media is what's consumed. So it's not that there's any other outside media source to compete. Almost all of the news sources here are nationalist news sources. There's one liberal news source and no socialist news sources here. So in any case, I'm not excusing it, but it's depressingly obvious that most Israelis are in a bubble in which they're not even open to the concept of, but as I said, of course, for Palestinians, it's going to be horrible in the coming years. But, I've seen many of my Israeli Jewish friends leave over the years, on the left side of the spectrum. And I know that in the coming years, it's just going to accelerate. People don't want to raise their kids in the society anymore, and they leave. And of course, that leaves fewer Israelis behind. Palestinians, most of the ones I know, are sticking it out. They're like, whatever, we've seen other regimes come and go, and we're going to hold to our land. But it's going to be a very, very, very difficult time, no question, in the coming years.
David Sheen, thank you for educating us, and thank you for coming on Arab Talk.
Thanks for having me.
That's the voice and the face of David Sheen, Israeli investigative journalist, talking about the rise and the embracing and the acceptance of a right-wing extremist, basically terrorist organization, the Kahanist movement, which is not only being embraced by Israelis, but being part of the mainstream political movement. It seems like the Israelis are facing the reality that we've been talking about for some time, that the extremist right-wing terrorists are kind of part of the government.
Well, Israel likes, and its surrogates right here, they like to talk about normalization with the Arab countries, but really this is normalization with a terror group. This is what Israel is undergoing now, that there is a major acceptance. Before they were shunned, after they kicked out Meir Kahane from the Israeli Knesset or parliament. Now, of course, there are at least half a dozen of them serving in the parliament. And then they're going to now be appointed to important ministerial positions, because Benjamin Netanyahu, of course, wants to win, and he did win. He formed a coalition with them, so he's going to be for sure named the prime minister. And so instead of kind of rejection, I don't say that's everyone, but a vast majority of the Israeli public, basically, they're saying, why not? They are like us. Many of us don't want to see Palestinians, or they want to, now they accept the fact, maybe we should be outwardly frank about saying we want to ethnic cleanse the Palestinians. The Kahanists, they say population transfers. They don't use the word ethnic cleansing, but they say population transfers. This is their kind of clean word for using ethnic cleansing.
Yeah, but let's be clear, Jamal, the Kahanist movement has been labeled by the US government as a terrorist organization. You have right-wing extremists, terrorists, who are not just part of Israeli society, but being woven into the fabric of its government in a way that they don't hide anymore. They're out there, they're public, they're supporting Benjamin Netanyahu. Benjamin Netanyahu cultivated these relationships in order to get back in the prime minister role. And we see Israelis kind of fretting and being upset that they're not accepted, yet here you have a society that embraces this really extremist ideology.
Well, my question to you, Jess, since the Kahanist movement has been labeled as a terror group, and by the way, they were also labeled as a terror group in Israel itself before. What will the Biden administration do when Ben-Gvir decides to come to New York or Washington, D.C. or Los Angeles, since he's part of a terror group?
I have an easy answer for you, Jamal. The Biden administration will do absolutely nothing about it, and he will be welcomed to the United States and feted. And, I know what the Biden administration will do. They will put out whatever press release to be mildly critical of the movement, but they're gonna let him into this country. They're gonna let him travel freely, and they're going to they're going to hide their embrace of this apartheid state and its leaders. So I don't think that the Biden administration and the State Department will do anything surprising here.
You are probably on the money, and sadly, I should say that you're on the money, and I can see now from the tone how they distance themselves. You know how these steps go. Just first thing they say, Israel is a sovereign country. We don't interfere. We don't want to interfere in their politics, even though the United States interferes in every other country's politics. But they'll say they're sovereign. We don't, interfere. And yes, and they'll bury their heads in the sand, with the exception of few courageous congresswomen and congressmen who might say something, but they're not going to do anything about it.
But here's the thing, Jamal. Why would we expect this country and the Biden administration to do anything when you have a former president of the United States hosting extremists, white supremacists, calling for the end of the Constitution, still almost 2 years after the attempted coup d'etat in the United States, is still running freely without any accountability. So, I mean, in some sense,
who are we to lecture? That's what they're going to say. Who are we to lecture? we have our own anti-Semites and racists and Islamophobes and homophobes to deal with right here in this country.
That's exactly right, Jamal. But the point being is that the United States likes to hold itself out as being this protector of democracy, yet they're supporting this kind of terrorist government. There's no other way of putting it. A Kahanist government. It's a Kahanist government in the apartheid state. They actively call for ethnic cleansing of Palestinians. And we want our listeners and viewers to know, they're just not saying Palestinians in the West Bank and Gaza need to be removed. They're saying that Palestinians in 1948, who are allegedly Israeli citizens.
More than this, just when of course our listeners, if they pay attention to the interview with David Sheen, they also have their sights on expanding Israel beyond its current borders all the way into Iran, as far as Iran taking over Egypt, Jordan, Syria, Lebanon. That's their grand vision of a greater Israel. I mean, he said that bluntly. That this is their long-term vision.
Yeah, and I want to remind our listeners and viewers that one of Benjamin Netanyahu's campaign promises is to annex the illegal colonial settlements in the West Bank. I mean, 800,000. He's going to legally annex them into the apartheid state. So let's see what the U.S. government, I don't know why I keep mocking it, Jamal. I know exactly what the U.S. government's going to do. They're not going to do anything. And this will be kind of the transition to our next segment. It's like, so the apartheid state is embracing this right-wing extremism. They continue to oppress and occupy Palestinian land. They continue to target and kill Palestinians. Many, And it's just in this last week, I don't know how many Palestinians
Kill
have been
journalists,
killed journalists.
extrajudicial killing of a Palestinian civilian,
Right.
just within the past 48 hours.
Just in 48 hours. And then they go and they travel internationally to Arab countries, and they're surprised that they're not loved by people in the street, by everyday Arabs.
I think they drank their own hasbara, and they drank their own they drank also Jared Kushner Abraham Accords. They believe that few governments signed these accords with Israel, that they are a representation of their people. And you and I know that this wasn't a grassroots movement. The ruler of the UAE did not, consult the population whether he should sign a peace accord with the apartheid regime. So they are in a shock. They send their journalists, and there are, I mean, I don't have to tell this to our listeners, they're smarter than this, and viewers, but there's so many interviews and videos that you can see on the internet, and you could see not only Arab fans, I should say. You got British fans and fans from Mexico and fans from Argentina and Brazil and wherever, and they're trying their best to interview them. Have a few Israeli reporters, and they're met with utter rejection when the person who gets pulled aside to be interviewed, and when they say that they are from Israel, they either walk away or they say "Viva Palestina" or "Long live Palestine," or we don't talk to Israelis, and they're shocked. They're shocked. I've seen so many examples of this. It's not like one or two or isolated, an isolated instance, and then they write about it and they say, we're really surprised, and they call it hate, which is not hate. They hate the apartheid system that you have created. They hate the images and the sight of your soldiers destroying Palestinian homes. They hate the sight of colonial settlers attacking Palestinian women. They hate the sight of your soldiers killing journalists, children, medics.
Well, I think you put it really well, Jamal. They drank their own Hasbara Kool-Aid. And somehow for these Israeli journalists to somehow be surprised that they have faced and are facing the people in the Arab world, the people on the ground, the population from all, and it's just not Arabs, as you said, from people from all over the world coming to the World Cup, basically calling out Israeli apartheid and aggression and not normalizing it. That they're surprised by this means that they are in denial. They drank their own Kool-Aid, and I will say, it's such a massive delusion on the part of Israeli journalists to be surprised by this. And just to remind our listeners and viewers, the Abraham Accords were signed by 3 despotic rulers, right? So what is it? Bahrain, Morocco, and UAE are the 3 countries who signed the Abraham Accords. There's 19 or 20 Arab countries. There's the greater world, all of whom are condemning, the apartheid practices, condemning, the fact that terrorists are running the apartheid state right now, and they're surprised. I have to tell you, Jamal, after I read that New York Times article about it, I just had this grin, from ear to ear, thinking about, welcome to the world. You want to be accepted in the world community, and this is what it's going to look like.
And the other thing, Jess, is that it's not just only a rejection of Israel and the apartheid, but also a show of solidarity with Palestine, with the Palestinians. I mean, we've seen people from Tunisia, from Morocco, that this young man running into the playground with the Palestinian flag and doing cartwheels, and then You have the largest flags during the match when Wales was playing, and you know, every single game there is a show of solidarity, and including from the athlete themselves. I mean, those are
Right.
big stars who were either wearing the Palestinian flag on their arm, you know, an armband, or saying something about Palestine.
Yeah.
And so that show of support, which is, I have to say, heartwarming, that
Yeah.
the Arab masses and the international community have not forgotten
So
about Palestine, made sure that it was present during
yes, and
FIFA.
Jamal, you know what the Hasbaras, one Israeli journalist, said to dismiss this international solidarity with Palestinians and his kind of analysis? He said, well, these are all Palestinians in the diaspora. That was his answer.
You know, let me tell you something. There is a strict rule, including, I have to say, in order to host FIFA, you have to allow a certain number of from different countries, including, and this is 4,000 Israelis who applied for access to the World Cup. So Qatar approved 4,000 Israelis. And so they have to, and remember one thing, they give preferential treatment to countries with teams that are going to be playing. So, like, you know, all the English fans, because England qualified, the French fans, the people from Spain and so forth. Palestine doesn't even have a team playing there. So if I were going to guess, there probably were less than 2% or 3% of the attendees who were there that were Palestinians. I mean,
but such a ridiculous kind of analysis.
No, you could tell from the people, you know, their accents and the way they dressed and the way they talked, whether they are Tunisians, whether they are Moroccan, whether they are from Saudi Arabia, by the way, Saudi Arabian fans, whether they are from the Gulf, from Qatar itself, or whether they are Brits. You know, a recent interview by an Israeli a media outlet was talking to fans after Britain won the match yesterday, and the fan said, "Long live, you know, Viva Palestine!" And the guy started like walking away with the microphone. I mean, this is a fan from England. You cannot tell me that he was Palestinian. They're trying, you know, of course, they either trying to dismiss it, and which, by the way, that's something very important, because if people right here in this country, they watch the games, they're aired on Fox Sports.
Yeah,
Sports Network. They never pan to these. They don't show you the support, by the way. You see it on different networks. Even you see it on BBC. You see it on TV5. Of course, you see it on Al Jazeera. When they pan out to the stands, and you see all the support and the flags and whatever, they try to avoid these scenes right here in the United States, so most people don't see it.
Yeah, and I think, you know, Jamal, we have to give credit where credit is due. With all of the international criticism leveled at the Qataris and at FIFA leadership for all of the, you know, corruption and difficulties and things that they go through and went through, which is not unique to Qatar, and this is true for any host country, by the way. But I have to say, and just as another preface, I've been to Qatar, I don't know, 10 times in the last maybe 3 or 4 years. So I saw all of the massive construction that was going on. I saw the throngs of workers who were, you know, bussed in on a daily basis to build these various venues. I feel like we have to give credit where credit is due. So far, you know, the Qatari World Cup has been pretty darn successful. The games have been really exciting and great, and the fans have been great.
And the hospitality. I mean,
it's fantastic.
People talk about the hospitality that they've received there. They've never received in any other country. I mean, they went out of their way. And you know what, about this criticism, again, you know, we started talking about the hypocrisy here when it comes to the Israeli public and so forth, but also the hypocrisy from the countries such as Germany to lecture Qatar on human rights, when it should be the last country on earth to lecture anyone on human rights and their treatment of migrant workers and their history with the Holocaust, and they're trying to kind of just taint the sport itself by and we know, you and I, and I think a lot of people around the world stand for human rights and the LGBTQ community rights and other people, but it's not, Germany is not the country to be lecturing about that.
No, and the reality is, and again, knock on wood, so far, this has been a tremendous success, that the Qataris have managed to pull this off. It's a very, very small country, and they've managed to bring in 1 million people to watch the World Cup. It's been a tremendous success so far. Let's hope it stays that way. But it's part of the racism that we have, from the European side of things. We didn't hear these criticisms coming from Africa, from Central and South America, and from other countries. We heard it mostly from European countries, and of course,
and I should remind people that Germany was quick to exit. Germany was the world champion
right
4 years ago, and they were talking about, if we won, like that's again the arrogance. We will not celebrate in Qatar. We will not celebrate. Well, they celebrated a quick exit. Yeah.
Bye-bye.
And several other countries, there were surprises. But for me, the big surprise, and I shouldn't say a big surprise because they have very excellent players. Morocco, man, they're playing tomorrow against Spain.
That's going to be a good match.
And that's going to be a good match. And the fact that they've made it this far. And of course, other major disappointments that we've seen. We've seen, of course, quick exit for the United States. And I made this joke on Facebook, and people didn't like it a little bit. And I said, that this was the fastest time that the United States left the Middle East in less than 2 weeks. But yeah,
the military and the politicians should take their cue from the.
It was a quick exit.
But
Canada, a quick exit.
Yeah,
Australia, a quick exit.
But Jamal, the U.S. team is not that good. I was glad they made it to the round of 16, to the quarterfinals. That's fine. They only scored 2 goals in 4 matches.
Well, that's kind of, again, the United States has probably the best athletes around the world in basketball, in American football, etc. Unfortunately, still don't invest a lot in the largest sport on earth, which is football, or what we call it here, soccer. The women's team won the world championship
twice.
And the men's, they're mediocre. That's what the bottom line.
Their offense wasn't that impressive. Not that we're going to do a sports analysis here, but they were just, I would say the U.S. team is mediocre. When you see how well the Netherlands and the UK teams are, the way they play, Japan, awesome.
Japan, yeah.
These Morocco, these are awesome teams with really great players. So yeah, whatever. And bye-bye Israeli journalists. I know it's really hard for you all to kind of be in Qatar right now and not be warmly embraced, but welcome to the world. That's what I got to say to them. Welcome to the world.
You've been listening to Arab Talk on KPO San Francisco 89.5 FM. We will talk to you next week. Go to our website, arabtalkradio.com, to download the latest episodes.
We'll see you next week.